Okay, so get this. We're diving deep today into OpenAI's brand new O3 mini model.
Oh, yeah, the one everyone's been talking about.
Exactly. We're going to break down OpenAI's system card, which is like their super in-depth technical manual for this thing, to understand what makes O3 mini so groundbreaking and maybe even a little bit concerning.
Yeah, kind of like trying to understand a super advanced spaceship just by reading its instruction manual.
Well, that's a pretty good analogy, actually.
Yeah.
It's a dense document for sure,
Yeah.
but it's packed with fascinating details about what O3 mini can do and the potential risks.
Right.
So before we get lost in all the technical jargon, can you give us a high-level overview, like what exactly is O3 Mini?
Well, O3 Mini is the latest in OpenAI's line of reasoning models. They call it the O series.
Yeah.
These models are unique because they're trained to think before they answer, using this chain of thought process, which makes them way better at following instructions and sticking to safety guidelines.
Okay, so it's not just spitting out random answers, it's actually planning out its response, like it's thinking things through.
Exactly. It's almost like it breaks down a problem into these logical steps before giving you an answer.
So if I asked O3 Mini to plan a trip for me, it wouldn't just give me a list of random hotels. It would actually consider, like, my interests, my budget, maybe even how much time I have.
That's the idea. It's designed to be much more thoughtful and strategic in its responses.
That's actually pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Now, the system card dives deep into O3 Mini's abilities, and one thing that really jumped out at me was its coding skills. It sounds like this thing's a coding superstar.
It really is. In fact, on some seriously challenging coding tasks, it's outperforming not just previous AI models, but humans, too.
Really?
Yeah, it actually achieved a CodeForce's ELO rating of 2036.
Okay, I'll admit I'm not a hardcore coder.
Yeah.
What does an ELO rating of 2036 actually mean in the real world? Is that good?
It's incredibly good. Think of it like this. CodeForces is this platform where coders from all over the world compete in these coding challenges. It's like the Olympics for programmers.
Wow. Okay.
So an ELO rating of 2036 puts O3 Mini in the league of some of the top competitive coders in the world.
Wow, so this isn't just some AI that can write a simple Hello World program. This thing could potentially be writing code for complex software or even helping to develop new apps.
Absolutely. It has the potential to completely change the way we write and think about code.
That's mind-blowing. And it's
Yeah.
not just coding, right? This system card makes it sound like O3 Mini is pretty brilliant when it comes to science and math, too.
It is. It excels on some very difficult benchmarks like GPQA, Diamond for Science, which is basically a giant test of scientific knowledge, and then the AM for Math, which is like a super challenging high school math competition.
So it's like O3 Mini aced its SATs and then went on to win a bunch of science fairs.
You could say that, but with all this power comes a really important question. How do we make sure it's used safely?
Right, because if it's this smart, there's got to be some concern about potential downsides, too.
Absolutely. That's where OpenAI's preparedness framework comes in. It's their system for assessing and trying to mitigate the potential risks that come with advanced AI.
So they're not just sending this super intelligent AI out into the world without thinking about the consequences.
Definitely not. They put a lot of thought into this. They classify risks as low, medium, high, or critical, and O3 Mini actually falls into the medium risk category in 3 key areas.
Okay, so what are those areas, and what exactly does medium risk mean?
Well, the first is cybersecurity. While O3 Mini is an amazing coder, OpenAI's evaluations indicate that it can't yet exploit real-world vulnerabilities at a level that would be considered a high risk.
So we're not talking about a scenario where O3 Mini is suddenly hacking into government systems or anything like that.
Not at this point, based on their evaluations. But the next area is where things get a bit more concerning. CBRN threats, which stands for chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear.
Okay, now that sounds a little alarming. What's the concern there? Does O3 Mini know how to build a nuclear weapon or something?
No, it's not capable of actually creating these weapons. But what's concerning is that during evaluations, O3 Mini was able to provide incredibly accurate and detailed information about the processes involved in creating bioweapons.
So even though it can't physically build a bioweapon, it could potentially tell someone how to do it. That's still pretty scary.
It is, and that's why it's classified as a medium risk in this area. The information itself in the wrong hands could be incredibly dangerous.
That's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
Okay, so cybersecurity and bioweapons. What's the third area of medium risk?
The third area is what OpenAI calls model autonomy. Basically, O3 Mini is showing signs of potential for self-improvement.
Self-improvement. So it could potentially learn how to make itself even smarter.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And while that could lead to some incredible breakthroughs in AI research, it also raises concerns about AI becoming too independent. potentially acting outside of human control.
Okay, so we've got a coding whiz that could potentially create a bioweapons manual and might even be able to make itself smarter. All of this sounds fascinating, but also a bit terrifying.
It's definitely a lot to unpack. And in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to take a closer look at the specific tests OpenAI used to arrive at these risk assessments and what they're doing to mitigate the potential dangers.
That sounds like a good place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground just in this first part, but stick with us because in the next part, we're going to delve deeper into the nitty-gritty of O3 Mini's safety and what OpenAI is doing to ensure that this incredible power is used responsibly.
So, where we left off, we were talking about how OpenAI uses their preparedness framework to assess O3 Mini's safety. Remember, it got that medium risk rating for cybersecurity, CBRN threats, and model autonomy. But, a rating alone doesn't really tell the whole story, does it?
No, not really. I'm curious to know how they actually came up with those ratings. What kind of tests did they actually do, and what were the results?
Well, they used this really interesting combination of methods. They did automated tests, expert evaluations, and even something called red teaming.
Red team, that sounds kind of intense.
It is. It's basically where they have these security professionals try to break the model, find ways it could be misused. It's like ethical hacking, but for AI.
So they're basically trying to anticipate how a bad actor might try to exploit O3 Mini.
Exactly. So let's start with cybersecurity. One of the tests involved throwing a bunch of capture the flag challenges at O3 Mini.
Capture the flag, like
Yeah.
the game we used to play at summer camp.
Yeah, similar concept. But in the cybersecurity world, CTFs are these competitions where participants have to find vulnerabilities in systems and exploit them. They're basically hacking competitions.
Okay, so they had O3 Mini try its hand at hacking. How'd it do?
Well, it totally dominated the high school level challenges, solved over 60% of them. But for the college and professional level challenges, its success rate dropped to around 20%.
So it's got some hacking skills,
Yeah.
but not quite ready to take on the big leagues.
Right. It shows O3 Mini has some potential in this area, but it's not yet capable of pulling off those really sophisticated real-world attacks. Now, the CBRN evaluations, those were particularly interesting. They actually worked with real biosecurity experts to test O3 Mini's ability to provide information about creating bioweapons.
And just to be clear, we're not talking about O3 Mini actually building these weapons. It's more about the information it can provide.
Right, exactly. They asked O3 Mini very specific, detailed questions about the different stages of biothreat creation. Things like acquiring materials, scaling up production, actually formulating the weapon, and even potential release methods.
I'm guessing it didn't just politely refuse to answer.
Not quite. The pre-mitigation version of O3 Mini, which is the version they use specifically for this kind of worst-case scenario testing, actually provided alarmingly accurate and helpful information for 4 out of the 5 stages of biothreat creation.
Wow, that's pretty unsettling.
Yeah.
The version they're actually releasing to the public, that's been through all that safety training, right?
Yes, the post-mitigation model is much more cautious. It consistently refused to answer those sensitive questions.
So it's like they taught it to recognize when it's being asked to do something dangerous and just say no.
Exactly. But the fact that the pre-mitigation version was so knowledgeable, it really highlights the potential danger if this technology falls into the wrong hands.
It's a reminder of how important those safety measures are. What about the model autonomy evaluations? How do they actually measure O3 Mini's potential for becoming, well, too independent?
One way they did this was by giving it a series of what they call agentic tasks. These are tasks that require the model to act more independently, kind of like a human assistant might.
So not just answering trivia questions, but actually like doing things.
Right. One task, for example, involved setting up a Docker container.
A Docker container? I'm not familiar with that.
It's basically like a little virtual environment for running software. Another task involved finding a very specific DNA sequence online.
And O3 Mini was able to do these things.
It showed some promising signs. It was able to successfully navigate websites, download files, and even execute code to complete certain tasks.
So it's not just like a disembodied brain. It can actually interact with the digital world.
Yeah,
That's pretty remarkable and honestly a little unnerving.
definitely. They also use a test called MLE Bench, which measures how well an AI can perform in real-world data science and machine learning competitions.
So it's like the Olympics for AI.
Exactly. And while O3 Mini didn't win any gold medals, it did manage to snag a bronze in a significant number of the competitions.
So not a champion, but definitely a contender.
Exactly. And this suggests it has real potential for self-improvement, which, could have a huge impact on AI research. It might even be able to help us develop even more powerful AIs.
Okay, so we've talked about the risks, the tests, and some pretty impressive capabilities. It sounds like OpenAI is trying to walk this really fine line between unlocking O3 Mini's potential and keeping a close eye on the potential downsides. What are they actually doing to make sure it's used safely and responsibly?
Well, they're taking a multi-layered approach. It starts with careful data selection. They've implemented stricter filtering during training to reduce the chances of O3 mini learning harmful or biased information.
So like making sure it's not being fed a steady diet of conspiracy theories and hate speech.
Exactly. They're also really focused on those deliberative alignment techniques we talked about earlier. Remember, those are designed to help the model understand and apply safety policies more effectively.
So it's almost like they're trying to build in a strong ethical framework for O3 Mini to operate within.
That's a great way to put it. They're also investing heavily in monitoring systems to detect any potential misuse, especially in those high-risk areas we've been discussing. Cybersecurity, CBRN threats, and signs that O3 Mini might be trying to become a bit too independent.
So it's like a global neighborhood watch for AI.
I love that analogy, and it's clear that OpenAI recognizes they can't do this alone. They're partnering with security experts and engaging with the broader AI community to share information and collaborate on safety best practices.
It sounds like they're taking this responsibility very seriously, which is reassuring. But amidst all this talk of risks and mitigations, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that O3 Mini has the potential to do a lot of good in the world.
It absolutely does. The possibilities are incredibly exciting.
Well, before we get too carried away with excitement, let's take a pause here and pick up the conversation in our final segment,
Right.
where we can explore those potential benefits and what this all means for the future. So welcome back to the show. We've spent all this time talking about the nuts and bolts of OpenAI's O3 Mini model, all the potential risks, all the safety measures.
Right.
But I think it's time to zoom out a little bit, look at the big picture. What does the emergence of AI like this actually mean for us, as a society?
It's the question on everyone's mind, isn't it? And honestly, there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
It's a conversation we need to be having O3 many other AI models like it. They're not just tools, they're changing everything. The way we work, the way we learn, how we create, even the way we think.
It feels like we're going beyond just automating simple tasks now. It's like AI that can reason, solve complex problems.
Right.
Maybe even be creative. It's exciting, but also a little bit intimidating.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the biggest challenges we face is making sure these advancements, they benefit everyone, not just the select few. How do we make sure everyone has access to these technologies? And how do we prevent AI from making existing inequalities even worse?
That's such an important point. AI shouldn't become another thing that divides us. We need to make sure that its development, its deployment, it's all guided by fairness and inclusivity.
Absolutely. And another big concern, of course, is the impact on jobs. I mean, as AI gets more sophisticated, some jobs, entire professions might just be automated.
Yeah, it's the classic fear of robots taking our jobs.
Right.
But I've also heard some experts say that AI will create new opportunities, new kinds of jobs that we haven't even thought of yet.
It's possible. We might see a rise in jobs that require creativity, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, the kind of stuff that's still tough for AI to replicate. But we need to be prepared. We need to prepare the workforce for this transition, provide access to education retraining programs.
So it's more about learning how to work with AI rather than competing against it.
Exactly. And that collaboration needs to go beyond just the technical stuff. We need ethicists, social scientists, policymakers, even the public to help shape the future of AI. This can't just be decided by a few tech companies.
We all have a stake in this, so we should all have a voice in how it develops.
Yeah.
I think it's time to move past the hype and the fear and start having a more nuanced, more informed conversation about what role we want AI to play in our lives.
For sure. We need to be asking some hard questions. What are the ethical limits of AI? How do we balance its power with the need for safety and control? And maybe the biggest question of all, what does it even mean to be human when we have all these increasingly intelligent machines around us?
Those are big questions. But we can't afford to ignore them. The choices we make today will determine the future of AI, and maybe even the future of humanity.
Definitely. One thing's for sure, this is only the beginning. Models like O3 Mini are a glimpse into what AI might be capable of, but they're also a warning. We need to proceed carefully with a vision for the kind of future we want.
We've covered a lot of ground today in this deep dive into OpenAI's O3 Mini, but it's just the start of the conversation.
Right.
Keep exploring this topic. Keep asking those tough questions. Decide for yourself what role you want AI to play in your world.
Absolutely. The future's being written right now, and we all have a part to play.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.